Let me tell you something that no one is saying loud enough. When someone disappears on you, ghosts you, cuts contact, builds distance, runs, and then comes back, they didn't return because they figured something out. They didn't come back because they magically became emotionally intelligent. They came back because your absence was louder than their avoidance. Listen closely, avoidants don't just run from love. They run from themselves. When they run from you and feel that void stretch open wide enough to echo and you're not there to chase them anymore, it's when the truth hits. It's just when it gets real. Because here's the brutal truth. People who vanish without a word aren't confused. They're in control. Silence is a weapon for people who don't know how to face themselves. Distance is comfort for those terrified of closeness. But when you stop running after them, you stop breaking your back to understand their pain while they ignore yours. When you stand your ground and say, I will not beg to be chosen, that's when they finally feel what they've been trying to suppress, the cost of losing someone real. I'm not talking about games. This is not manipulation. This is about the undeniable gravity of someone who was always there, always loyal, always open, always loving, even when it was never reciprocated fully. See, consistency was never the problem. It was their capacity. And when avoidants vanish and come back, it's because your energy wasn't just something they liked. It was something they depended on, even if they never told you. Here's what nobody tells you about emotional avoidance. They feel deeply, but they're paralyzed by vulnerability. Love terrifies them. Intimacy feels like exposure. So what do? They run, they disappear, they shut down the moment things get real. When they feel too much, they make you the threat. They call you needy, intense, too emotional. When in reality, you were just available, present, ready. And that scared them more than rejection ever could. When they come back after silence, it's not because they found someone better. It's not because they finally missed you. It's because you were the only one who actually saw them and stayed. And the silence, that was never peace. That was punishment. That was avoidance in action. But they couldn't replace your presence. They couldn't outrun the mirror you held up just by existing. That's what avoidance can't escape. The reflection they see in your love. It forces them to confront who they could be if they stopped hiding. Now hear this loud when they come back. It's not a compliment. It's a test. It's the universe asking you. Will you accept love that only knows how to return when it's convenient? Will you keep handing your soul to someone who only values it once it's gone? Or will you finally choose yourself over their fear? Because if you don't love yourself enough to walk away from people who make you feel invisible, then silence isn't just their pattern. It becomes yours too. And this isn't about hate. This isn't about revenge. This is about clarity. Someone disappears on you. They're showing you the limits of their emotional courage. And when they come back, it's not always growth. Sometimes it's loneliness. Sometimes it's regret. Sometimes it's guilt dressed as closure. Rarely is it transformation, because people don't change in silence. They change in the fire. They change when they face their pain, not when they hide from yours. So if they return with the same avoidance, the same patterns, the same inability to go deep, then it was never love, it was comfort, familiarity, attachment, and you're not here to be someone's emotional rest stop. You're here to be chosen fully, freely, fearlessly. Let me speak directly to your soul right now. If someone comes back after silence and you still feel the same ache in your gut, the same walking on eggshells vibe, the same confusion about where you stand, then they didn't come back to love you. They came back to silence you again. And if you're thinking, but what if they changed? Great question. Then let them show you, not just say it. Change doesn't whisper. Change doesn't dodge questions. Change doesn't play games. Change is humble. Real change says, I was wrong. I hurt you. I ran. I'm not proud of who I was. And here's what I've done to become someone better. But if they can't look you in the eyes and own it, if they're still deflecting, blaming, dodging, then guess what? They didn't evolve. They just got lonely. Here's the truth they'll never say out loud. It was always you. You were always the safe place, the peace, the anchor, the light they didn't know how to hold. Instead of growing up to meet your depth, they left. Not because you were too much, but because they were too little in that moment to receive you. And now they want to return to your warmth without offering heat of their own. So what are you going to do now? Fall back into old cycles or rise into your self-worth? Let their return be the confirmation, not the confusion. Let their silence teach you more than their presence ever could. Let their absence remind you, real love doesn't abandon, it stays, it grows, it communicates, it shows up, especially when it's hard. If they come back after silence, it doesn't mean they've earned you. It means you've leveled up. You've become the version of you that no longer tolerates disappearing acts disguised as love stories. You've become someone who no longer chases ghosts. You let them haunt their own silence. Because you're not waiting anymore. You're building, healing, you're rising, and you're not opening the door to anyone who had to lose you just to realize your worth. If they come back after silence, maybe, just maybe, it wasn't about them at all. It was always you. Your energy, your clarity, your light. And now it's time to protect it like your life depends on it, because it does. No more half love, no more breadcrumbing, no more emotional shutdowns dressed as boundaries. You deserve all in or nothing at all. You want to know why avoidants can't answer the question, what are you feeling right now? It's because for most of their life, they never learned how to feel. They only learned how to survive. Think about that for a second. Feeling is a threat to someone who is trained to associate vulnerability with pain. Their nervous system doesn't register closeness as safety. It registers it as danger. So when you ask them something simple like, how do you feel right now? You're not just asking for words. You're pressing against a wall they built brick by brick over decades. And here's the kicker: that wall worked for them. It kept them safe. It kept them protected. It allowed them to function in a world where expressing emotion meant punishment, rejection, judgment, or shame. So now when someone comes into their life, someone real, someone grounded, someone emotionally available, and dares to ask them to look inward instead of deflect outward, their instinct is to freeze, deflect, shut down, or run. Because they don't just fear the question, they fear what might come up if they actually answer it. To see someone squirm, ask an avoidant what they're truly feeling, and watch as they either intellectualize it, over-explain it, minimize it, or avoid the answer entirely. Not because they're bad people, not because they don't care. Because to really feel means stepping into a part of themselves that was never safe to explore. And if you've never had permission to feel, how the hell are you supposed to name your emotions in real time? You're not, you perform. You pretend, you protect. You package your discomfort as detachment. You push people away not because they're wrong for you, but because they're too right, because they feel too safe, too intimate, too honest. And that kind of closeness threatens the fortress you've been living in for years. And that fortress, it doesn't have room for connection. It only has space for control. That's the game. That's the prison. That's the secret. Every avoidant hides they're not cold. They're scared. Scared to open. Scared to be seen. Scared to discover that their entire identity is built on avoiding pain rather than embracing truth. So when you ask, you feeling right now? And they shrug or say, I don't know, or they change the subject, or suddenly get quiet. You're not being rejected. You're witnessing the inner war between their longing and their fear. One side of them wants to let you in, but the other side only knows how to push you away. One part of them is starving for connection, while the other is choking on the possibility of being exposed. Because feelings aren't logical. For someone who built their identity on performance, perfectionism, independence, and rationality, emotions feel like chaos. So they escape into their head, into plans, into space, into silence, into anything that doesn't require them to sit in the heat of their own heart. Because if they ever slowed down long enough to actually feel, they'd realize how empty they become, how numb, how guarded, disconnected from the very life they say they want. And that pain, that realization, it terrifies them more than being alone ever could. So don't be fooled by the silence. Don't be confused by the calm exterior. Underneath every avoidant is a child who wasn't allowed to be vulnerable, who had to grow up too fast, who was told either directly or indirectly that emotions were too much, too messy, too inconvenient. So they shut down, they closed off. They grew into adults who don't know how to access what they never learned how to process. You think it's easy for them to love you? It's not. Because loving you means surrendering control. And for an avoidant is the battlefield where they have to kill the parts of themselves they spent years protecting. And that's not romantic. That's terrifying. So when you ask them how they feel, it's like pulling the pin on a grenade they've kept buried for decades. That question forces them into territory they don't know how to navigate, because feelings mean chaos. Chaos means danger, and danger means pain. So what do? They armor up. They escape. They ghost. They go cold. They go silent. They go vague. And then you're left questioning your worth when in reality, they're the ones terrified of confronting theirs. And I'm not telling you this to make you pity them. I'm telling you this so you stop blaming yourself for being the one who feels too much. You are not the problem. Your emotions are not the issue. Your need for communication is not a weakness. You are not too intense. You are awake. You are present, emotionally available. And that is not a flaw. That is your power. And if someone can't meet you there, if someone can't answer, what are you feeling right now? Without shutting down or blaming you or retreating, then maybe they're not ready to hold what you bring. Because you bring depth, you bring clarity, you bring accountability. And not everyone can handle that, especially those who've spent their whole life hiding from themselves. You're not broken for craving connection. You're not needy for asking for honesty. You're not weak for feeling deeply. You're human. And the more you stop shrinking yourself for someone else's emotional limitations, the more you'll realize the right person won't just answer your question. They'll ask you back. They'll lean in. They'll do the work. They'll make the terrifying choice to stay open even when it's uncomfortable. Because real love doesn't hide, it reveals, it stretches, it expands, it challenges. And if they can't answer what they feel, then you have to ask yourself, are you falling in love with a person or a potential? Are you holding on to someone's heart? Just the hope that one day they'll finally open it. Because until they learn how to name their emotions, they'll never fully choose you. Not because you're not enough, but because they don't know how to choose themselves. If that's not real to you yet, one day it will be. Because when you finally meet someone who says, here's how I feel even when it's messy, you'll never again tolerate someone who goes silent when you ask them to be honest. You ever sit across from someone you've poured your soul into, someone you've shown up for again and again, and you ask them the most basic, honest, essential question, do you want from this connection? And they look at you like you just asked them to solve world hunger. That blank stare, that hesitation, that long pause that says everything without saying a damn word. That right there is the moment you realize loving someone who doesn't even know what they're reaching for. Not because they're trying to hurt you, but because they've never been taught to choose. Avoidants don't answer that question because answering it means making a claim. Making a claim means risk. It means vulnerability. It means accountability. And they don't live in that world. They live in maybe. Let's see where it goes. They survive in the gray area because they're unsure of you, but because they're terrified of what it would mean to be sure. Because being sure means no more escape. It means no more backdoor. It means no more plausible deniability when the relationship gets real. So when you look them in the eyes and ask, what do you want with me? Their body tenses. Their eyes drift. They minimize. They say things like, or I'm figuring things out, or let's just enjoy the moment, or the classic, I don't like labels. And yet they're labeling you every day with their actions or lack of them. Here's what's really happening under that deflection. What they want is to feel safe, to feel desired, to feel connection. But they want it without the responsibility of naming it. They want your love without the cost of consistency. They want your time without the commitment. They want your loyalty without giving you clarity. And the truth is, they're not confused, they're careful. Careful not to promise what they don't intend to deliver. Careful not to step fully in because they're always half out. And this is what people don't get about avoidant love. It's not about emotional incapacity. It's about emotional control. They don't like to commit to what they can't control. Nothing is less controllable than raw, real human intimacy. So they keep it foggy. Fog is their language. Vagueness is their defense. They'll say, we're vibing, we're good, we're seeing where it goes. But when you ask them, do you see a future with me? They'll either dodge it, flip it back on you, or say something that gives you just enough hope to stay while never giving you enough certainty to build. That limbo. That's their playground. While you're over here craving structure, direction, clarity, they're treating this like a sandbox. So here's the hard truth. Avoidants don't answer the question, what do you want? Because they're afraid that if they name it, they might lose it. They think defining the relationship is a trap. They fear that naming love puts a target on it. That once it's labeled, it's boxed in. That the moment they commit, they become vulnerable to loss. That's the thing they fear most, losing control, losing autonomy, losing their emotional insulation. And while you're over here offering real connection, they're protecting a wound they never told you about. Maybe they grew up in chaos. Maybe they had to be the strong one. Maybe vulnerability was punished, or worse, mocked. So they learned that the only safe way to love was from a distance. And now you're asking them to step forward, to speak the truth, to claim the relationship, to declare their intentions. And it feels like death to their nervous system. But that's not your burden to carry. You cannot spend your life waiting for someone to finally make up their mind about you. You cannot build a future on maybe. You cannot hand your heart to someone who won't even hold a conversation about what you mean to them. That's emotional self-harm dressed up as patience. That's not loyalty. That's self-abandonment. Let me say something even louder for the people in the back. If they can't tell you what they want, it's because they don't want it enough to risk telling you. It's not that they're emotionally illiterate. It's that they don't want to pay the emotional tax that comes with being clear, because clarity requires courage. It requires being seen, requires stepping into the unknown with another person and saying, yes, I want this. I want you. I'm in. That scares the hell out of an avoidant, because if they say that and it doesn't work, then they don't get to retreat into, I never said I was all in. But you deserve better than vague love. You deserve better than ambiguity wrapped in romantic language. You deserve someone who doesn't shrink under the weight of your heart. Someone who doesn't hide behind silence. Someone who, when asked what they want, looks you in the eyes and says, I want you, I want this, and I'm ready to show up for it. Anything less than that is theft. It's stealing your time, your energy, emotional bandwidth. And don't you dare let the fear of being alone keep you tethered to someone who's afraid of fully choosing you. Because staying in relationships with people who can't articulate their desire for you teaches your subconscious that your needs are too much, your clarity is inconvenient, and your love is a liability. And that's a lie. Your clarity is a gift. Ability to ask the hard questions is power. Your emotional depth is not a burden. It's a blessing to the right person. So stop asking questions that keep getting dodged. Stop interpreting silence as mystery. Stop mistaking hesitation for depth. If they wanted you, you'd know. If they were ready, they'd say so. If they saw a future, they'd speak it out loud. And if they can't or won't, then they're not your person. They're your lesson. And it's time to graduate, because you don't need someone who keeps you confused. You need someone who clears the fog just by walking in the room. You need someone who, when asked what they want, doesn't flinch. They rise. And until then, stop shrinking. Stop waiting. Stop hoping they'll change. Take your love where it can grow, not where it has to beg just to be recognized. You ever wonder why they come back after silence? After weeks, maybe months of ghosting, disappearing, withdrawing like you never even existed? Suddenly they show up with a, hey, how have you been? Like nothing happened. Like the silence wasn't loud enough to shake your whole sense of self-worth. Like their absence didn't leave you staring at your phone, second guessing every damn thing you ever said. And now they come back acting casual, expecting access like they didn't disappear. And here's the brutal truth most people don't want to say out loud. They didn't come back because they had some great revelation or because the universe told them you're their soulmate. They came back because your energy, your presence, your light, your love, it never stopped echoing inside them. They came back because despite their silence, despite their distance, despite their avoidance, you were always the one. But here's where it gets real. They didn't leave because they didn't care. They left because they did. That's what avoidant love does. It pulls away when things get real, when the feelings go too deep, when the connection gets too honest, when their emotional defenses start to melt and they feel naked in front of you, not physically, but emotionally. That's when they run. Not because you hurt them, but because you saw them. And that kind of exposure for someone who's spent their whole life building walls is terrifying. But here's what they didn't expect, that your absence would haunt them. That your silence would speak louder than any words ever could. That the person who made them feel seen, actually seen, would disappear too. And now they're back, but not with answers, not with a plan, not with clarity. They're back because they missed the light you brought into their darkness. They're back because connection doesn't lie. They're back because the bond you created wasn't just chemistry, it was truth. And truth doesn't die just because someone tries to ignore it. But now you're standing at a crossroads. Do you let them back in? Do you reopen that door? Or do you finally ask yourself the question you've been avoiding? Did you make room in your life for someone who kept running from it? Why did their return make your heart skip when their absence shattered it? Why is it so easy to believe in their comeback, but so hard to believe you deserved better all along? Because here's the raw, uncomfortable reality. If someone disappears when things get deep and only returns when they feel you slipping away for good, that's not love, that's fear. That's not devotion. That's emotional hunger. They're starving for what they couldn't hold. They're drawn to what they're not ready to keep. And until they do the deep, confronting, uncomfortable inner work to face their fear of intimacy, their return is nothing more than a loop, a cycle. Cycles aren't relationships. They're patterns of pain dressed up as second chances. So when they come back, better ask yourself, not, do they still want me, but do I still want someone who couldn't handle me the first time? Because if they couldn't hold you when you were whole, how the hell will they protect you now that you're healing from the wounds they left behind? Don't romanticize their return. Don't call it fate when it might be emotional avoidance seeking temporary comfort. Don't confuse longing with loyalty. Sometimes people come back not because they've changed, but because they feel the gravity of what they lost. And that gravity is real, but it's not a guarantee. You can't build a foundation on someone's regret. You build it on commitment, emotional availability, on clarity, on choosing each other out loud in real time with full presence. An avoidant doesn't come back with, I'm ready. They come back with, I miss you. And missing you doesn't mean they're prepared to love you the way you need. It just means they feel the weight of your absence. If you mistake that for readiness, you'll find yourself back in the exact same pain you finally crawled out of. Because love without readiness is a form of emotional torture. And don't get it twisted. They do feel something for you. They always did. That's why they pulled away. That's why they ghosted. That's why they went cold. Because you touched something in them that they didn't have the tools to hold. And now they come back hoping you'll make it feel safe again. Hoping you'll soothe the storm they never learned to calm. But your job is not to be their emotional life raft. Your job is not to teach someone how to swim while they're dragging you under. You are not their healing project. You are not their safe space if they keep treating you like a temporary shelter. If they come back, they better come back with changed behavior, with real communication, with actions that speak louder than the pain they left behind. Because if they come back and you shrink yourself just to keep them, you're not being loved. You're being used. Not maliciously, not cruelly, but because their need for comfort outweighs their ability to give consistency. That is not a place you build your worth from. You build it from truth, from your own evolution, from your ability to look at someone you once begged to choose you and say, I've already chosen myself. You don't owe them another chance just because they finally felt the emptiness you were drowning in alone. You don't have to open your heart to someone who only found theirs when they realized you were gone. Because real love doesn't require a second chance to show up right the first time. So when they come back after silence, don't just listen to their words. Watch their life. Look at their patterns. Study their capacity. And most of all, listen to your body. Your body knows. Your nervous system remembers. Did their return bring peace? Or did it stir the same chaos you worked so hard to heal from? That's your answer. Not your hope. Not your fantasy. Not your potential. Your nervous system will tell you the truth their silence couldn't. Because when love is real, it doesn't vanish. It doesn't disappear. It doesn't run when things get deep. It stays. It chooses. It shows up. Every damn day. And if they couldn't do that before, they better come back not with a story, but with a transformed soul. And until then, don't you dare forget you are not the reason they ran. You were the reason they had something real to run from. That's power. That's proof. That's who you are. You want the truth about why avoidance can ghost you, disappear, vanish into silence like you never existed, and then show up later like nothing happened? It's because to them, emotional distance is survival. To them, pulling away when it gets intense isn't betrayal, it's instinct. And that's what so many people misunderstand. You think they left because you weren't enough. You think maybe if you'd been more chill, less expressive, more mysterious, they wouldn't have pulled back. No, stop right there. That's the one talking. That's your inner child trying to contort yourself to stay lovable in someone's fear-based logic. The truth, you were enough. You are enough. You were just dealing with someone who only knows how to love in fragments. They don't know how to hold wholeness. Not because you were too much, but because wholeness triggers their unfinished business. Their nervous system isn't calibrated for intimacy. It's calibrated for independence, self-preservation, and emotional control. So the moment you ask them to step closer, to meet you in vulnerability, to answer that one confronting question, why did you really leave? They can't go there because that would require them to face the shame they buried. That would mean admitting they walked away not because of you, but because of them. Because you represented something terrifying, stability, depth, connection. And that's the irony. What you thought was attractive about them, the confidence, the independence, cool detachment, that's actually the mask they wear to keep love from cracking them open. So they run, they vanish, they ghost, they pull away the moment things feel too good. Yes, too good. Because in their world, safety feels unfamiliar. Vulnerability feels like exposure. Closeness feels like a setup. And that's what most people don't understand. Avoidants aren't heartless. They're not narcissists by default. They're scared, petrified, frozen in a trauma response they probably don't even realize is happening. But fear in relationships doesn't just hurt them. It wounds you. You start doubting your worth. You start replaying every interaction. You start internalizing their disappearance as rejection. And here's the most dangerous part. If you're not aware, you'll start chasing them not for love, but for validation. You'll start seeking their return not because you want them back, because you want to feel like you weren't crazy, like the connection was real, like your love meant something. But let me say this loud and clear, your love was never wasted. Just because they couldn't receive it doesn't mean it wasn't powerful. It was real, it was soul level, it was honest, but love has to land. And if the other person isn't emotionally available, it's like pouring water into a cup turned upside down. No matter how much you give, it spills out. So when they come back after silence, after detachment, after choosing distance over dialogue, and you're tempted to lean in again, tempted to welcome them back without the hard conversation, ask yourself this: has anything actually changed? Is your heart just hoping they've magically become ready because you miss them that much? Because hope without change is a trap. And emotional loyalty to someone who hasn't earned it is a slow form of self-abandonment. I get it. Your plids, you loved them deeply. You saw the potential. You connected with their soul beneath the shutdown, but you can't date someone's potential. You can't build a relationship on what they could be if only they healed, if only they opened up, if only they came forward. You have to meet them where they are, not where your heart wants them to be. And where they are might be miles behind your level of emotional maturity. They are might be stuck in a trauma loop that keeps replaying every time someone gets too close. Where they are might be addicted to the space between connection and commitment, because it gives them the illusion of control. And you've outgrown that. Or maybe you're just realizing now you were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. A person who couldn't answer your love with action. A person who couldn't meet you in the middle. Person who couldn't sit in the heat of your truth without shutting down or disappearing. And that's not your burden to carry anymore. You deserve reciprocity. You deserve consistent energy. You deserve someone who doesn't punish you with silence when they're overwhelmed. Someone who says, I'm scared, but I want to work through it, instead of ghosting and calling it clarity. Someone who steps toward you when the emotion rises, not someone who disappears and leaves you emotionally gasping for answers. Because if you keep accepting love from people who disconnect when it matters most, you're training yourself to tolerate starvation as affection. You're teaching your nervous system that anxiety is normal, that waiting for someone to return is a part of love. That silence equals intimacy. No, that's emotional confusion. That's trauma bonding. That's a relationship built on your unhealed need to prove your worth to someone too shut down to see it. So when they come back, and they will, because your love had a presence that can't be replaced, don't fall for the fantasy. Look at the reality. Have they done the work? Are they speaking a new emotional language? Or are they just resurfacing because they felt the void? Because missing someone and being ready to love them are two very different things. They might miss your energy, your support, your softness, your safety. But if they haven't healed the wound that made them run, they'll just do it again. So stop romanticizing the comeback. Start romanticizing consistency. Stop fantasizing about the return. Start fantasizing about emotional security. Someone who doesn't disappear, someone who talks things through, someone who stays when it gets hard. That's love. That's growth. That's evolution. And you deserve that, not because you're patient, not just because you're loyal, but because your love is sacred, because you bring light into places people try to hide, because your truth is rare. So don't give it to people who haven't built the courage to stand in it. When they come back, let your boundaries answer the door before your heart does. Let your healing speak before your history. Let your evolution lead the conversation. Because the version of you that cried for them, waited for them, begged for closure, that version has leveled up. That version isn't available anymore. The new you doesn't just want love. You want alignment, emotional maturity, a safe place to land. Anyone who can't offer that, they don't get to sit at your table just because they finally felt the hunger. Let them eat the silence they gave you. Let them chew on their avoidance. Let them face their fear without making it your job to soothe it. You are not responsible for teaching someone how to love you while bleeding from the wounds they caused. Let them do the work. Let them rise. Let them show up, or let them go. But you keep choosing yourself over and over till someone else chooses you with the same clarity, the same strength, the same presence. That's when you know it's real. That's when you stop bleeding for people who only show up after the damage is done. You want to understand the truth behind what happens when they come back and you feel that rush, that mix of hope, confusion, even joy. Like maybe this time it's real. Maybe this time they've changed. Maybe this time everything will finally fall into place. Like your love will finally get the happy ending was always reaching for. But let me tell you something that most people don't want to hear because it shatters the fantasy. Just because someone comes back doesn't mean they're capable of staying. You hear that? Read it again. Let it sink deep. Just because they return, just because they miss you, just because they can't stop thinking about you, doesn't mean they've done the internal rewiring it takes to truly show up and build something real. And that's where the heartbreak hides. That's the cruel paradox. You can be loved deeply by someone who is absolutely incapable of giving you the kind of love you need to thrive. And if you're not careful, you'll start confusing longing with loyalty. Start interpreting their absence as depth, like their disappearance somehow proves the weight of their emotions. But in reality, silence is not romance, it's avoidance. Distance is not devotion, it's fear. And when they come back, they finally reach out after leaving you in that painful limbo. They're not always bringing a changed heart. They're often bringing the same chaos, the same confusion, the same emotional limitations, just dressed up in fresh words and temporary affection. You want to believe it's different this time. And I get that. You've invested time, energy, tears. You've built fantasies around who they could be. It would look like if they finally woke up and saw your worth. But don't let your desire for healing become a prison that keeps you tied to someone who only knows how to take, then run, then circle back when they feel empty again. This is what people need to understand. Avoidants don't come back because they suddenly developed emotional maturity. They come back because they feel your absence like a loss of supply. You were their emotional home, their comfort, their reassurance. You were the one person who made them feel seen in a world they've armored themselves against. But when you become someone's emotional safety net and they haven't done the work to be emotionally responsible, they don't see you as a partner. They see you as a refuge. And that's the most dangerous place to be, where you're more useful to them as a healer than as an equal. You were never meant to be somebody's therapist, somebody's emotional mother, somebody's rescue boat. You were meant to love and be loved in return, equally, fully, without games, without disappearances, without walking on eggshells wondering, will they leave again when I get too close? And if that question is still alive in your chest when they return, nothing's changed, no matter how different they sound. Words are cheap, promises are temporary, but patterns tell the truth. So when they come back, don't get caught in the nostalgia. Don't get high on the memory of how they used to make you feel in the beginning, because avoidant dynamics always start hot and heavy, all passion, all connection, no depth. Why? Because intensity is their illusion of intimacy. It's the smoke that hides their fear of staying. So you think it's soul deep love, but it's not. It's adrenaline, it's validation, it's trauma bonding dressed up in fairy tale packaging, and then they pull away, disappear, leave you wondering what you did wrong. And by the time they come back, you've already rewritten history in your head. You've filtered out the confusion, the pain, the shutdowns. You've magnified the moments that felt like magic. That wasn't magic. It was magnetism built on unhealed wounds. It was your need to be chosen colliding with their need to escape. And when they come back, it's easy to ignore all of that and think, maybe they're ready now. But here's what readiness really looks like: consistency, emotional transparency, the ability to stay present when the conversation gets hard, the willingness to meet you in vulnerability, not hide behind silence. The capacity to own their past behavior and show you through action that they've changed. And if you don't see that, if all they're bringing you is charm, apologies, and empty affection, then you're not dealing with growth. You're dealing with guilt, with longing, with someone who wants the feeling of love without the responsibilities of loving. And that's not your burden to carry anymore. You've already done enough. You've given grace. You've forgiven things that broke your heart. You've overextended your empathy to someone who didn't know how to hold it. And now you have a choice to make, not based on hope, not based on history, but based on reality. Can this person consistently, safely, respectfully show up for you now? Are they emotionally equipped to love you in the way you need, not just for a week, not just when they miss you, but every single day? Because if they're not, the most powerful thing you can do is love them from afar, not with bitterness, not with revenge, but with clarity. You can honor what you felt, acknowledge what you shared, still walk away knowing that someone can miss you deeply and still not be good for you. That someone can love you in the only way they know how, and it still won't be enough if it leaves you feeling empty. And that is not your fault. You didn't ask for too much. You asked for honesty. You asked for presence. You asked for emotional safety. And if they couldn't give you that, it says everything about their readiness and nothing about your worth. So stop waiting for their return to mean something it doesn't. Stop tying your healing to whether or not they finally show up. You don't need their comeback to validate your value. You are already whole. You are already worthy. The right love, the mature, steady, emotionally available love, won't have to leave and come back to recognize what they have in front of them. That love won't need a second chance to get it right. That love will meet you, choose you, stay. Not because they miss your light, but because they're ready to rise beside it. You've got to understand something deep in your bones. Love that disappears when it's challenged was never love that could protect you when it counted. The return of someone who ghosted you, someone who fell silent when you needed them most, isn't a symbol of fate. It's a test of whether you've risen or whether you'll repeat, a test of whether you've learned to trust your own healing more than the temporary high of being wanted again. And don't get it twisted. Being wanted and being valued are not the same thing. A person can want you for their comfort, their ego, temporary emptiness, and still have no capacity to truly value you, to honor you, to be consistent with you. And that's where most people get stuck, because we live in a culture that romanticizes the comeback. We've been sold this idea that if someone returns, it's because they realized what they lost, and now it's finally time to make it right. But let me tell you something raw and honest. The return doesn't mean transformation. Return doesn't mean readiness. The return doesn't mean redemption. Sometimes the return is just the echo of their loneliness calling your name again, because they haven't found anyone else who makes them feel the way you made them feel. That's seductive, right? That kind of pull, that kind of emotional gravity, it can feel like destiny. But it's not destiny, it's dysfunction in disguise. You were never meant to be the person they run to when their world goes quiet, only to become invisible the moment they feel overwhelmed again. And yet, that's the pattern so many of us fall into. We become the emotional sponge, a safe place, the soft landing for someone who hasn't earned access to us. Why? Because deep down, want it to mean something. We want all that pain, all that waiting, all those nights of overthinking to finally pay off. We want the silence to have a purpose. But silence isn't romantic, it's avoidance. And when they come back without accountability, without effort, without an entirely new emotional blueprint, all they're doing is pressing rewind, not play, not fast forward, rewind, back into the same cycle, back into the same uncertainty, back into the same version of them who left when it got real. So when you ask yourself, what does their return mean? The only honest answer is this: it depends on what they do, not what they say. Words can be weapons when they're used to pull you back into patterns you worked so hard to break. Here's the truth most people don't want to admit. It's not just about them. It's about you. Your nervous system, your inner child, your attachment, because a part of you was conditioned to equate love with chaos, with chasing, inconsistency, with winning someone over who keeps pulling away. So when they come back, your wound lights up, your hope rises, your heart leaps, not because they're right for you, because your trauma believes maybe this time you'll be chosen fully, clearly, without question, but your worth was never up for negotiation, and love doesn't require you to perform, to prove, to plead. If it does, it's not love, it's survival mode. You're not meant to chase someone into healing. You're not meant to bleed for someone who won't even acknowledge the knife they're holding. You're definitely not meant to keep proving that you're enough to someone who was never looking at you clearly in the first place, because when someone leaves, they make a statement. But when they come back, they better come back with an answer. A pattern of change, not just nostalgia, not just I miss you, because I miss you is cheap when it's not backed by I've changed. When someone has done the work, real gut-wrenching, the mirror and own their site work, you'll know. They won't rush you. They won't love bomb you. They won't try to skip over the pain and act like nothing happened. They'll sit in the discomfort with you. They'll let you be angry, let you express what hurt, and they'll stay. That's what change looks like. Not just coming back, staying through the storm. But if they return and expect access without accountability, if they expect your heart without rebuilding trust, if they expect connection without conversation, then you need to see that for what it is. It's not love. It's emotional convenience. And you are not someone's fallback plan. You are not a waiting room for someone who wasn't ready the first time. You're not the emotional rehab center for someone who refuses to face their patterns. You are the prize. You are the sacred. You are the miracle. And anyone who comes back into your life has to meet that version of you now, not the broken one, not the begging one, not the one who was willing to shrink just to keep their attention. That version is gone, dead, buried in the fire you walked through. And what rose from those ashes? That's power, that's clarity, that's worth. So if they're back, they say they've changed, put it to the test. Watch how they move. See how they handle hard conversations. Pay attention to how they respond to your boundaries. Do they make space for your truth? Or do they get defensive and shut down like before? Do they ask what you need, or are they still focused on what they want? The answers are always there, loud and clear, if you're willing to look without the rose-colored glasses of longing. It's not about what they say when they return. It's about what they build when they stay. And if they can't build with you, if they can't meet you with consistency, emotional safety, and maturity, then you already know what time it is. You walk, not with bitterness, with power. You bless them, you release them, and you thank the universe for the lesson, because the return wasn't your reward, it was your reflection. A mirror showing you how much you've grown, how much you've healed, how much you now understand that love isn't just about feeling something, it's about sustaining something. And if they're not ready to sustain it, you're not wrong for closing that door. You're not heartless for choosing peace. You're wise. You're sovereign. You're free.